I am a professor at NYU. I'm also the father of one recent alum and a father of another college student, and I can tell you firsthand how lucky the students at Pace University are to have the dean of the business school that they do. This is a great educator, but also just a real legend in the television and media industry, going way, way back to his days at HBO. He's done 1,000 things in the industry, but he is, I think, first and foremost right now, one of the great leaders in media education. He is, I think, one of the major forces behind Pace's business school becoming what it has, which is a recognized leader, certainly here in New York, but also in the education community around the country. He has been enormously generous to ODI, offering to host this not just for the last couple of years, but also moving forward. We could not do this without him. He is a friend. He is also just a tremendous person. Welcome to stage, Dean Neil Braun.
Thanks, Evan. It's a pleasure to be here. This is something I look forward to every year. Thank you all for being here this morning. I've known Jeff Bewkes since the 1980s when we worked together at HBO. I was the Senior Vice President of Film Programming in those days, and he led the programming finance team, reporting to the CFO. I'm not going to take you through his education and career because we'll talk about it a little bit in a few minutes. But I want to make a few personal observations about Jeff as the introduction. Back at HBO, I had an idea about how to finance movies, and Jeff and I worked on it together and made it a reality. And in the process, he actually taught me accounting, because every different structure that we came up with would flow through the P&L differently. And it was a challenge to find one that would work for Time Inc., our parent, fit into their financial structure. So we needed to work on that on an iterative basis. And now that I'm the dean of a school of business that was founded as an institute for CPAs, I'm very grateful to Jeff for teaching me accounting. Back in the 80s, HBO was extremely hot, as it is today. It was the first way to see movies at home, uncut, uninterrupted, no commercials. It was before streaming, before DVDs, before video cassettes. And it attracted lots of smart people. There were tons of really smart people working at HBO in those days and at the studios that we dealt with at a regular basis. But even then, Jeff's peers and colleagues recognized that he was the smartest among us and he was destined for great things. I've met a lot of smart people in my career, and I've met a lot of people with great personalities and the ability to fit in any room. Jeff is one of the few who has it all: intelligence, empathy, humor, and humility. When I asked him to be here this morning, despite being in the middle of the biggest transaction of his life, an $80 billion plus combination of Time Warner and AT&T, he didn't hesitate. Please give a warm welcome to the CEO of Time Warner, Jeff Bewkes.
Good morning. After that, it's downhill from here after that.
I really want to thank you again for being here. I know how crazy a time it is for you, and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You know, he just mentioned this accounting, which I hope we get back to. You know, probably the best accounting teacher I had was a Pace professor, whose name I'm forgetting. But he was teaching all the Citibank first years when I got out of business school. And he was the toughest, tightest accounting prof I ever had. Pace.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I'm sure all my accounting professors will be claiming they were that person. So
they're probably still on tenured faculty, if you know that.
Yeah, probably. So Jeff, in preparation for this, I was like looking at the internet, trying to find things I didn't know about you. And one of the things I saw was a quote from one of your Yale classmates from when you were in college that said you were a free thinker and a member of the lunatic fringe. So tell us what you were like in college.
Well, I was a free thinker and a member of the lunatic fringe. I can't remember. Actually, and I hope some of you have done better than I did. I had a very good opportunity at a very good college, Yale College, and I did not, I can admit now, attend as many classes as I could have. And you know that phrase, I went to this college, I went there, but I didn't do as much study as I should have, and I do regret it a bit.
Okay.
But I learned other things when I was there.
Okay. You want to talk about any of those?
Well, yeah, you know, that college had a lot of art schools, drama schools, and there was a lot of film obsession. And I really got interested in all that, and I started to learn a little more of the personalities and the kind of worldview that people that are mostly in the arts have, which I hadn't had before.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I know when you left college, I think, you know, the first thing you did kind of dabbled in documentaries for NBC, actually for NBC, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, and I know you did a lot of different things before you got to HBO. I know you got your MBA at Stanford. You did things before, you did things after. Could you talk a little bit about, I mean, that's kind of a period that a lot of our students are going to be entering. It's sort of that period of self-discovery. Who am I in the world? What do I like? What do I don't like? Could you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, I'd tell you what I got out of it. So I was a public school kid in the suburbs, New York, Chicago, when I grew up. And then when I was 10th grade, I went to a boarding school in New England, Deerfield Academy, which was very good, much better than my high school. Then I went and I lived overseas in the summers. I was working in Paris for IBM, collecting bills for typewriters. Now, if you think that was not a good job, you're right, it wasn't a good job. But remember, I was in Paris. So when I was 17, it was great. So it kind of opened up my risk-taking ability. So then when I went to college, and I was a house parent, and I didn't do anything constructive, both in the summers or at the college, actually. And then towards the end, the last year, I got a job at a TV production company. I wanted to go into Hollywood. So I had long hair at the time. I cut it, went to LA. My friends thought, what happened? He sold out, which I did. I was going into commercial production. We were making sitcoms and everything. Didn't continue it, but it gave me a taste of what the studio business was like. And then I came back and got out, and I needed a job. It was the recession. I got this job at NBC. Very low pay. Couldn't even really afford a studio. I had a sublet for a while, got kicked out, ran out of money. Then when the documentary ended and I got laid off, so I do advise you, if you go into production, it's a very difficult, if you can do it and get through it, it's good, but it's very difficult to get jobs and then to have any kind of, even if you get a job, getting the next one's very hard. So it's erratic, it's very tough. I was out of work and decided to go to business school. So I did that, worked for a winery while I was there, in mostly accounting type of thing.
You got your MBA from Stanford?
Stanford, yeah. And that was in the mid-'70s, right when Stanford was in the beginning of that Silicon Valley phase. HP, Sun were already there, and Intel was there, but a lot of the ones we know now were not. And that was a great difference of culture because Stanford and Stanford Grad School, with its engineering business schools, are very connected to the outside community, more so than the East Coast schools tend to be. And I was working in a wine company doing that. And then when I got out, I went to work at Citibank, and that's where I got the PACE accounting training. And did a couple years in international banking. I did that to learn lending, because what you do if you're a banker is people come in, they want to borrow money. You have to decide, well, is your project going to work? I mean, you have to literally analyze what could go wrong. So it's a pretty good education that way. And it sounds probably to you that it makes no sense to go from there into HBO, and it started. But to me, it made perfect sense. And I went into sales. And then they moved us, you know, you did it too, they moved us around. Sales, finance, programming, promotion, finance, everything.
Yeah, I think your first job at HBO was selling to hotels, right?
Yeah. It was a bit of a, if you think about it, so you go to a hotel and you say to the person, you know, you should put HBO in every room. And you think, okay, what is it? Well, you got to pay us $2 a room for every room. And the owner would say, well, what do I get out of that? I mean, I'm paying you $2 a room. So, well, you get more occupancy, right? People see HBO and they're driving along. They come in, stay at your hotel. He says, okay, great, I'll do it. So the first guy would do it, But then, of course, the guy across the street has a hotel. You go over there, he doesn't. And by the time you're done, all of them have HBO. We're getting the money, and nobody. It ends up like a tax on the rooms.
And
Probably not good for them, but.
Yeah. So you moved from, I think you did a few different sales things, and then you moved into the finance hierarchy at HBO, right? I mean.
Yeah, finance, budgeting, all that kind of stuff.
Right, and that's when we got to know each other, because you were head of programming finance, yeah.
Stuff. Now, if we had known that you were going to become Dean Braun,
yeah,
we would have always referred to him as, yes, Dean Braun. That's a good point.
Yeah, well, I make my family call me Dean Braun now.
You should.
So tell us, before you were CEO of Time Warner, you were CEO of HBO.
Yeah.
Tell us about, how does that happen? How did you become CEO of HBO?
I don't know. Well, I went through all these different jobs, and you were there. So, in the early days, HBO was actually then, in the 70s, 80s, kind of like Google, Netflix now are. Very fast growth, inventing the business model as we went. Yeah. You would think today, for you that grew up after it was there, we didn't, we were making it up. You'd think it was about programming. It wasn't. It was about distribution. And that's probably the fairest way to describe what's going on in the digital revolution, whether it's Amazon, Google, et cetera. Because media, whether it's the early studios, Warner Brothers, Fox in the 20s, or television in the 50s, or cable in the 80s, it was always about distribution, meaning the way that you get the entertainment onto the screen, whether it was a movie theater in the early days or then a TV screen in the later days. It's always about how do you get the thing there. And the reason I say it is, depending on, let's say, a television, think of it that way. You all know a television show is a half hour or an hour. Well, that's what we thought, because, you had to invent something. They had a schedule. Everybody had to see the same thing when it started, so they'd have commercials in the middle. It was free. In a way, it reminds you of Google, YouTube now. Free, right? Ad-supported, lowest common denominator programming. And then as that distribution form changes, it allows you to change the type of programming that you're making. Think of an HBO show like Game of Thrones, or a Netflix show. Handmaid's Tale is not Netflix, it's somebody else. Well, anyway, all those shows, you watch them whenever you want. You don't start on the hour. They're not necessarily 60 or 43 minutes long to fit the commercials. You can watch them one after another, which in our day you couldn't. It very much changes the nature of the distribution, and the way it's paid for changes what the content is. And that's something we should talk about today. Okay. Because that's the key thing that's going on. It is.
We'll get to today. I mean, I definitely, but let's continue just the trajectory. I mean, so when did you become Time Warner CEO, and how did that happen? How did you go? What were the steps that brought you from HBO to?
Well, I was working. at HBO. Then that's one of the divisions. At the time, I was head of HBO. I think we had 10 divisions: music, studio, networks, publishing, books. We had every cable company. And over the years, basically, for those of you in business classes, from about 1980 to 2000, the media industry was doing conglomeration, which is what I just said. You're having TVs, companies next to publishing companies. It didn't really make that much sense operationally in terms of owning all these things. Did they really work together or not? By the 2000s, the scale of industry, think of what you see now at Amazon, was getting so big and global that you needed to take whatever you were in and do that at scale. So it doesn't help to have a magazine publisher like Time and Magazine People next to an HBO, next to a Warner Studio. They're not really related. It does help to have any of those things aligned with other like things to get enough scale to compete with the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles. So what was happening from 2000 on is de-conglomerate. Every company was essentially separating out those things that didn't go together.
You spun off AOL, Time Inc., the original owner of HBO and creator of HBO, was, and the cable systems.
Cable systems, AOL, the magazines, We collapsed the studios into Warner Brothers.
So you
we
decided
sold the music company and put it out. Warner Music is separate now.
So it's interesting. So despite distribution being the critical factor for success, you decided to be a content company and really lay off all the distribution arms.
Yeah, because the distribution that we had, the cable company, was too small to compete.
Right, I see, okay.
It was only 12% of the country, and if you think of a Comcast, Charter, ATT, or Verizon, they're all 15 to 25%.
So I think you coined the phrase TV everywhere.
Actually, it could have been Richard Seaclose, who said, or it was Keith Kokoza, who works at Time Warner. That was.
But you got credit for.
I got credit. You know, they always give credit to the CEO. Don't believe it. It's not true.
Okay. So what was it that you saw in the ecosystem of entertainment that made you kind of publicly state this is the destiny?
Okay, it's very simple for everybody to see. If you all grew up, which you did, with HBO on demand, meaning you could turn on your HBO in the 90s, no other network in the world could you do this, and you can watch last week's show or last night's movie on demand on HBO on demand. We did that in the 90s. We didn't charge for it. It was an embedded feature of HBO. So you had the schedule of the stuff showing up at 8 o'clock and all that. And you had the ability to look at anything you wanted that was in the HBO network. We could see that that was the future of television because we were doing it. And we knew that everybody, you know, if you're making, think of Breaking Bad or, you know, I'm trying to remember the spacey thing Netflix is doing, the political thing.
House of Cards.
House of Cards. If you can't watch those in order, you can't watch the show, right? What happened last week? I don't know. So you had to have the VOD ability to make that kind of programming. We had started doing it with Sopranos 20 years back. And we could see that as viewers went there, they were really going not just to watch, say, a House of Cards on the news services. They were going to watch reruns of shows that had been on NBC or CBS or HBO. They were going to watch reruns because they were there on demand. They hadn't seen them. So we wanted to make all television, every channel, the whole dial, VOD, just like HBO was. And we told you know, our affiliates, they got to spend money to be able to do this. We'll give you the rights to all of our networks on demand for free. We're not going to charge you, provided that you pass them on free to the consumers. You can't charge for this. You have to. We'll give them to you for nothing, provided you give them to the viewers for nothing. Mostly, they didn't do it. They were waiting to use it as a negotiating tool in the next renewal of the network deal with the cable operator, which was stupid, but they did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes agendas of different companies between the distributor. I mean, one of the things that's really hard about over the top, you heard the expression earlier this morning, OTT, over the top, meaning bypassing the middleman. If you're the content owner, bypassing either the broadcaster or the cable operator and going directly to the consumer.
Using the wires of the cable operator.
Yeah, for internet connectivity, right?
Yeah, without paying for it, whereas we, to get our networks across, have to give them a lot of money.
Right. So when you were migrating from your legacy distributor partners, who you were totally dependent on for decades, and now going directly to the consumer, that had to cause some issues.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you think about it, so think of the current, you know, whichever channel you used to watch was, you know, it could be CW, it could be HBO, Fox News, CBS, whatever. You're watching it, and you're watching it over a cable, satellite, or telco system, probably, and you're paying a fee for either the HBO channel by itself, or you're paying for 100 channels like TBS and MTV as a group. 40–50% of that money that you pay is charged, you know, the network doesn't get it. It stays with the cable operator to pay for the plant, which doesn't just include the wire that goes to your TV set-top box, it also includes your internet service, whether it's wired to your house, broadband, or whether it's mobile to your phone. And so the TV networks are essentially sharing the money you pay with that infrastructure to pay for the infrastructure. The internet broadband-only companies, this would be YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, they're going straight to you over that same plant, but they don't give any money to support the plant. That's called net neutrality. It's one of the aspects of a net neutrality regime, which could be done in various ways. So it basically gives a huge financial advantage to the new disruptors, the digital companies, who are using the same plant we are to get our services across, but they're not paying half the money or 40% of it the way we are. So they're basically using that money that we're paying. We're actually paying for their carriage, actually, which is not particularly a good future for the legacy media company.
Yeah. So you actually, the last time we were together over the summer, I went up to Jeff's office to just talk to Jeff, because I always learn plenty when I talk to him. You taught me an acronym, the FANG companies: Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. You know, we grew up in decades that the mantra in the business was content is king.
Well, there was an argument. Was it the content or was it the distribution?
The content companies said content is king.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So in today's world, given the FANG companies and the changing landscape, you know, where is content in the scheme of things?
Well, I've never been able to reach a conclusion over the 30 years of whether there's content or distribution as it goes back and forth.
I think it's a seesaw.
Yeah, you really can't, because you can't have one really without the other. If you don't have content, then whatever distribution platform you have doesn't have the things people want. If you have the content but not good distribution, and in a way that's what we just talked about, when the legacy television networks, who we were trying to put VOD, which is TV everywhere, on all of them, and mostly they didn't do it. Most of the network companies and the cable companies did not offer you, and you all know it if you're sitting in your seat, did you go home and have 100 channels of VOD on your television? No. Or if you did, could you find anything on the interface? No, you couldn't. So that meant that the legacy content, the stuff on HBO or TNT or whichever your favorite channel is, it actually wasn't getting through to you in a quality way, the way you have a right to expect it, which is VOD, commercials are not, depending how you're doing it. With a navigation, you can find your favorite show. It wasn't getting through. So in that sense, distribution, which could have been king and wasn't, actually shut off the content industry. And most of the content ended up on the new digital platforms as reruns.
So let's talk about the new dimension that the FANG companies bring to the table.
Yeah.
Data. Where does data fit into the content distribution value chain?
Well, it's getting bigger and bigger. So data, what Neil's thinking is, you're there using your mobile phone, you're at home. Either the company that connects you over wireless or wired, they have a pretty good insight into your activities. They also have a billing relationship with you. They know what you're watching, they know where you're looking, who you're talking to. In many cases, they know the content of what you're talking about. They know what you're buying. They know what sites you're going to. They know when you're watching this. They know if you watch this, you go to that. They know your demographics, your age, your interests. They know your financial situation. So given all of that, companies that have that, which would be the distribution companies that you have connections from, or it would be the digital companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, that you have a direct online relationship with. They can sell you new services, upgrades, or different subscription offerings, which the legacy media companies, we don't know your name, we don't know where you are, we don't know whether you're interested, so it's harder for us. And they can sell advertising to, Volvo or Procter & Gamble if you are in the behavioral set that they know they want to reach. And they won't then buy an ad from us because we're out there saying, hey, we got 5 million people watching the show at 9 o'clock. Why don't you pay for all 5 million of them to see the ad? And increasingly the advertisers, depending on whatever product you're selling, they're saying, I don't need to pay for all 5 million people. I know that there's a subset of X people, they're the candidates to buy my product. I'm going to go to the digital company that can tailor the ad for them. And so it's moving the financial support of both the advertising and the subscription away from the legacy media structure into the digital disruptor structure at a scale that is not just national, it's global.
Yeah. So that's probably a good segue to talk about what you're doing now and what the things you've rejected along the way. I know a couple of years back, Fox made a bid or tried to make a bid to make a bid to take over Time Warner, and you and the board pretty much gave them a cold shoulder. Why was that not a right combination for you?
Well, there's a lot of elements to that one. If Fox company, and at the time, as you know, Fox has a bunch of networks. They have a studio. They have some similarities with us. We're in the same, a lot of the same business lines, so we are horizontally competitive. So one question is, if you try to take a merger like that, companies that compete, Fox News against CNN, Fox Studio against Warner's, you know, FX against TNT, TBS. You go into the regulatory review, not just in America, but everywhere, and the antitrust authorities, in order to try to preserve competition, will have to look at that and say, is it a good thing for competition to take these different alternatives that compete and make them one company? So there was a risk analysis that we didn't think looked very good for that, number one. Number two, if you look at the price of that deal, they said it was $85 a share, but for those accounting students here, 2/3 of it almost was in the Fox stock, and it was propped up on predictions they had made of very high earnings growth that we did not think were going to come true. They did not come true, and their stock went down. So the real value of that offer, we thought, was not the sticker price. We thought it was $15 less, which would be, and it is today. I mean, if you look at, if we had taken that, it would be worth somewhere around 68, 70 bucks a share for us. And we have a deal underway with AT&T that's over $100 a share. So it just wasn't a good course for our shareholders. And we weren't thinking at that time we would end up with some other company. We were thinking our independent earnings course was way better than that price, which it in fact was.
Okay, so you had rejected Fox. You were going an independent course. You thought you were going to compete in the world. Why AT&T? Why now? How did that happen?
Well, so 2 years later, which is last summer, as you look at the trends of the cable network bundles, the increasing move of younger people first, then older people, to getting their television watching from a variety of new sources, which is fine. More competition is always good. It you know, increases the excellence of the platform and eventually the content. We just looked at it and said, you know, if we're going to compete in this new world, go out 5, 10 years, we need to have the ability to go directly to certain customers and find out, is what we're offering you good? Do you like our programming? Does it help us target what we do in terms of which channels go into which bundles? Does it help us to sell advertising? Is there a way that our company, if we have now AT&T, which has close to 100 million consumer relationships, nowhere near as big as Google, Facebook, those guys, but it could then start a move in the television industry where more data and more VOD is brought to consumers, which is what consumers want. They want to have the benefit of targeted ads, so you don't have to watch ads you're not interested in every hour. As you know, there's a lot of ads on scheduled TV. And you get both content and commercial messages that are more valuable to you, and you get less waste. So that was essentially the reason.
Okay, so imagine everybody in the audience is the kids of your best friends.
Yeah.
They all want to know how to get into the business.
Yeah.
So given what's going on today, given what you've learned over your decades of success, what's the best advice you have for our students?
Well, look, anything I say on this is going to annoy somebody that's in our industry, but I'll tell you what I know the best. And this is on kind of, if you're a college age person or grad school age person trying to get into, quote, the media business, And the boundaries of the media business now include cable telcos, they include networks and things like that, production companies, and internet companies like the Facebook, Googles, and so forth. If you want to be in the media side, the two ways that have been the most jobs and the most kind of flexibility as the industry goes for years, it's kind of what we did. It's distribution, sales and marketing, and the changes there. And it's finance and accounting, so that you understand the economic totality of any of these creative businesses. What it is not is mostly production and programming. Those are much smaller. They're much less predictable. There's a lot more connection required. If you look at how you get into the, quote, creative side of the business, it's very hit or miss. It's very cottage industry, so it's people that know people trying to get you in. So it's a lot harder to do.
Yeah, no, I think I say something similar to students when they ask me how do I get in the entertainment business. I usually say be very, very good at something else.
Yeah, something else.
Because
right,
so many people want to be in the entertainment business that if you're the best HR person or the best accounting person or the best marketing person, whatever your discipline is, that's how most of us got into the entertainment business. Yeah. I did it as a lawyer. You did it as a finance person.
Yeah, and if you think of the people that have become general manager, chiefs of these things, they are not usually from the creative side. They're mostly from the, quote, business side. They're either lawyers, finance accountants, or sales and distribution, ad salespeople.
Yeah, and every entertainment company has all the business disciplines. So whatever you're best at, that's your best way to get into the business.
Yeah, go in there, do that.
Go in the business. So I want to make sure that we have time for your questions. It's a unique opportunity to talk to the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company. Let's see what kind of questions we have from students. Jeff, while we're doing that, one of the things we emphasize is the importance of finding mentors in life.
Yeah.
Did you have mentors along the way?
Yes, but it was I've always had trouble with this question because I had mentors of I had like hundreds of them. I didn't have a formal mentor.
I understand.
You were one. I mean, the people that worked for me, quote unquote, were mentors to me. People that tried to kill me that were rivals were mentors by some form of, what do you call that? Don't do that. Yeah. I see what you're doing. I don't want to do it. So you get mentors everywhere. There's a lot of talk, which if I could go on this, of quote, leadership. That always makes me feel a little strange because it has a premise I don't agree with. That, okay, leadership is the person who's the CEO or the captain of the ship or something. Well, in a way that's obvious, so fine. That's actually not how you do that.
That's not how you do that. That's
how some people do it. They call those moguls, and you see the problem with that.
Yeah.
I think we read it last week.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
There's too much subjectivity and ego for that. Leadership is no more important. In fact, it's impossible logically that it wouldn't, than followership. If you're going to be in a team of people and do something, you have to be able to lead when it's time, when they need you to lead. You could be the lowest person. You need to be able to follow when that's better, and you could be the person in charge and understand you need to follow. Because the dynamics of power, if we move over to that, which is not leadership, that's power, that's authority, is that you get bad information by definition if you have a hierarchy.
I call that not your style, the other style, the hippo style of management, highest paid person's opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a good way to get the right answer, as you all could imagine, because everybody tells you what they want whatever they think you want to know, which means whatever mistake you're in the middle of making, they're going to help you make it. That's what it means. So
that's true.
What you want, and then when they all march off the cliff, because your last instruction was, I think we ought to go over there with imperfect information, and then you find out the whole unit walked right over the cliff and died.
Right, so when you hire, obviously you're always, I'm sure everybody's heard you hire people smarter than you. Smarter than you at something.
Yeah.
You want everybody who works for you to know more about something than you know.
You do. Yeah, so you basically, that's where the followership of the, quote, decision maker comes in, because you know they have better information than you do.
Yeah. And
what they have is more local, direct info. What you have is more info from more places. So you got to put those together. And you have to do that you could be, you know, the entry-level person wondering, is anybody going to find out? I don't know what I'm doing. By the way, that's exactly what we all think, if you're honest with yourself. And then if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to get promoted, now you've got another problem, which is, oh God, now I'm promoted to this little unit. I wonder if everybody has yet figured out I don't know what I'm doing. And then by definition, all the people that are working for you, you've done this, I've done it. You can't come, if you get promoted, now you're in charge of something that you used to not be part of. That means everybody you're in charge of knows more about it than you do. And they know that. And you're there pretending that you ought to be in charge, which is not that easy on you or them. Because they know that, well, maybe you should be in charge, but you don't know anything. So unless you let us tell you, you're not going to be a good boss, which is true.
Yeah,
but then you don't want to become, and I struggle with it, you don't want to become, oh, let me be, you know, a popular boss by doing whatever everybody wants me to do. You can't do that either. So you'll have to learn to kind of put those together.
Yeah, but it's real. I mean, really, the why you get to be boss is because, like you said, you have more global information and you have judgment. So you get a lot of input from a lot of different people, but ultimately the decision is yours and the responsibility is yours. And so, you know, that's the leadership part of being the boss, right?
Well, yeah, and then for you, and it's true even if you're in the early stage of your career, because particularly in that, actually, because you're going to be, at least I was, more insecure about the decisions you make, because you're going to have to make decisions that you know everybody doesn't agree about. If they agreed about it, you don't have to make the decision. You only have to make it when nobody agreed. So then you don't know if you did the right one. And then when you do that, you get the people who agreed with you supporting it, even if it turns out it wasn't right. And the people who originally were somewhere else kind of resisting it in some form. And you want to find out, well, I gave this decision. I'm not sure it's right. Increasingly, I think it wasn't. And, you know, some groups telling me, oh, yeah, you're right, just add more force. Another group saying, no, it was wrong the first place, you idiot. And you're trying to figure out how to get out of that. So what you want is for everybody to think, okay, it is permissible, it's not going to annoy you, the boss. If I come in and say, you know, I'm not so sure what we decided, what you decided, was good. You know, maybe we ought to adjust it or something like that. You're trying to get that. You're trying to create a self-correcting thing. It's a culture, not just a system.
And this is where I think tone at the top really matters, because I always say if you have a title or a position of authority, your first job is to make it safe for people to tell you the truth.
Exactly. And that, you know, and the more insecure you are, the more scared you'll be at reversing your own decision or at helping or allowing the people that were against it, who may also, by the way, it's not just, you know, this is all sounding very antiseptic. They may not like you. They may think you're not entitled to that job. And if you now take your decision, which you now realize was a mistake, you make it open to them that they were right all along and you know they were trying to kill you anyway. That's not that easy to do, but you should do that. You should do the right thing in all cases.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've always admired about Jeff, total integrity. Okay, let's see questions from the audience. We've got about 5 minutes.
Hi, my name's Tori, and I wanted to ask, what is like the one quality you would say that you have that helped you climb that ladder and get you to become the CEO?
I didn't look for promotions or anything. I just did my job. And I think, to be honest with everybody, you know, people on the other side, people above you, people below, you should just try to tell the truth, including I don't know what I'm doing or I'm not sure this is right, what I'm coming out with in my work product. That's your best thing to do because it gains trust. People will help you. Now, some people take advantage of it to wipe you out. So you got to not die when you're doing this. But, you know, that's what I would say. It's, you know, being transparent to the extent you can.
We have another over here. Yes.
Hi, my name's Chanel. I'm going into the advertising and marketing industry, and I was just wondering, like, with these media companies, like, what branch exactly would that be more towards?
Wait, what was the last sentence?
What branch with these media companies, like HBO, Time Warner, would I probably possibly be trying to enter to?
And you're saying for advertising and so forth?
Yes.
Turner Company. HBO doesn't have advertising, so you'd be going to TNT, TBS, Cartoon Network, CNN, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tamika Shockley. I'm a senior mass communications major at Delaware State University. My question is, with all that you have going on and all the successes that you've done in your career, what's your next move?
Well, I think my next move is that when the merger with AT&T closes, that they're going to shoot me out of a cannon. I think that's my next move. And I'm hoping to land in a soft area. That's my next move.
Do you have any?
I don't have a plan after that.
Okay. Well, part of the fun, I guess, is spending time figuring that out, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
And then my second follow-up question is, when this is all over, can we get a quick picture of you with Delaware State University before you go?
She'd like the quick picture at the end. I don't know how quickly you're running out again.
That's great. I'll take
Thank you.
When we're done.
I'll be the oldest person in the picture.
I think I'm older than you. Okay, over here.
Hi, my name is Joe. In regards to the AT&T merger, what would you say is the possible faults in that merger, and what would be the biggest benefit for Time Warner?
Okay, what would be the downside, what would be the upside? So the benefit is the thing we talked about, which the ATT management agreed, and that is they've got a big consumer platform that can reach you directly on a mobile device or a television distribution. And what they're trying to do is make that capability they have at AT&T more useful and higher quality for all of you on all video programming, every network from every company. And you know, it's not ours differently than the others. If it was that, you wouldn't be interested. So it's got to be everything. That's a benefit. And then getting the data of, well, what are people watching and what do they want, whether it's advertising, targeting, or certain kinds of programming. That'd be the next benefit, again, for all networks. The downside would be we are in the television Time Warner business, we're dealing with a kind of a risk problem all the time. We're making shows or movies that we don't know whether we'll execute them well or whether they're going to work with the audiences. It's not the same kind of decision process that creates hits and brands and earnings for us as the one if you're running a very large, ATT is, a very large, very expensive, very capital invested intensive plant, and they have to be very data driven on how to incur costs to build the plant, how to operate it, how to fill it like an airplane that doesn't have empty seats so that they're getting efficiency out of it. It's a very different, much more precise analytically and operationally measurable form of business decisions. And so there's some of both of those in the media business, but that's the different kind of decision process. And so the downside would be whether they can do both of those. They got to keep the one from the ATT, and they've got to add the one that comes from the media business.
I think I've recently seen a commercial, HBO Free for Life with your ATT subscription. Is that a deal you guys did, or are they already anticipating the benefits of the merger?
Yeah, well, actually, that's not related to the merger. So HBO has deals with all of its cable and telco distributors, and if they have to pay HBO. If they decide that they can, deliver HBO to you, and they're not going to charge you explicitly, whether it's for HBO or Showtime or something, if they decide to do that because they think it sells more subscriptions to other things, that's, they're
That's
all,
marketing.
yeah, and it's not just AT&T doing that. There's, and I'm not saying it's free HBO, there's all kinds of incentive deals you get from distributors for Netflix, for HBO, for Showtime, for bundles of basic cable channels, which are ad supported, all kinds of things like that.
Okay, one last question from the audience. We're out of time. Okay, well,
Thank you all.
Let's thank Jeff Bewkes for spending time with us. Thanks, Jeff.
I really appreciate it.
It's fun too.